Well, Graeme, Nicola, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Science and faith, it's a really, sometimes seems an almost insoluble, knotty problem. Why is it that scientists and Christians seem to be at loggerheads all the time?
Well, Alan, I can't really answer that question because there are a lot of scientists who are Christians and they work joyfully, gladly, combining both their science and their faith. And on the other hand, I think much of the antagonism between science and Christian faith is in fact blown up by the media, who have their pet champions such as Richard Dawkins, who certainly does not represent the average rank and file scientist.
Nicola, you teach theology at Laidlaw College, but you know you're involved with Arosha. You're very strong on ecology. Is that what you found? Is that there's maybe a lot of media hype involved?
Well, I think there are people on both sides who are sort of emphasising the conflict model. You know, that they've got to be in conflict, and I try to persuade people that really it's very exciting. And while there are difficulties, I think there are huge difficulties, that science and faith are very exciting partners. Yeah.
I mean, it's very interesting because, Graeme, your area of study is genetics.
I'm a cell biologist.
Cell biologist. So we're talking about DNA and genomes. And I've read one of your papers, and after I got to page 3, I had so many initial letters running around my head. I had no idea what was going on. But you seem to be saying that you can see where we came from by looking at our DNA and our cell record.
Yes, we have a history in our genes. I think DNA is a very elaborate, a very detailed script. And people can use DNA to trace human population migrations around the world, or to trace genealogy. I mean, genes and genealogy have to be connected. But of course, that's only our biological origins. Clearly, as Christians, we also believe that we are persons made in the image of God. And therefore, our physical background, our physical history, is only a part of who we are as creatures responsible to the God revealed in Christ.
Does God have a place in evolution, or does it just happen?
That's like asking, does God have a place in history? And for me as a Christian, although history seems such a mess, with its wars, its famines, its human evil, yet as Christians we believe that God is working in and through the process of history to bring his purposes to its conclusion. I mean, the Old Testament history is such a tragic history, and yet out of that comes his Son, you know, the incarnation. And I regard evolutionary history as very much like that. It's full of chaos, it's full of randomness, and yet out of this process has come a creature that bears the image of God, which of course moved me to worship.
Do you get frustrated as a scientist that people don't go further into it?
Yes, I do. Just coming back to the compatibility between science and Christian faith, I just wish people would realize that the early scientists became scientists because they wanted to worship God, because they had come to know God through Christ. They were so excited about God's world that the study of the natural world was really an expression of their theology. And I think it's a matter of rejoicing to be able to study the natural world and to recognize it all as the work of God. And the other thing, I have so many Christian colleagues in science. True, many of them beaver away and they never have time to raise their heads and talk to people because they're fighting for grants and research and all the rest of it. But there are so many wonderful Christians in science that it really is an exhilarating experience being there. And as far as the clashes are concerned, well, you'll always find people in whatever sphere of life you are who have no time for your worldview.
Would you say that there would be a time, I'll ask you both this, there will be a time when there won't be the clashes, that we'll find a way of reconciling the two sides of the debate?
At the moment, things don't seem to be going in that direction. But no, I do live in hope because, I mean, as Graeme said, you know, science and faith have often been partners rather than at war with each other, and one hopes that that may eventually be the case again.
Yes, I believe that the resources are there for people to embrace both, because I believe in embracing both. You have the complete worldview. Clearly you don't have to know science to have a wonderful worldview, because that comes from Christ, but I think just being able to appreciate nature as being the work of God, and then linking in with how we read of God's work through human history, I find it it's a wonderful thing. So the resources are there for a true and joyful rapprochement, but there will always be people who thrive on conflict.
I suppose at the end of the day, the question is it actually a central issue to the whole point of the gospel, or is it a sidebar that's getting us all worked up over something that's really just not central?
It's obviously not essential, but I think it's central because it's a part of the story within which we live, and if we don't agree about the story, then I think we're alienated from each other. And people have always lived within a story, and it gave them identity and it gave them hope. And I think it is a tragedy that within Christianity we have quite different stories. And so for that reason I think it does matter. And also for reasons of truth, of course. Yeah.
I think of one of the great theologians of 100 years ago, B.B. Warfield, who was excited about evolution because from his Calvinistic background, it was impossible to believe that the processes of nature could be independent of God. And therefore I think ultimately it does boil down to the sovereignty of God, and that is central, however we see it. But I think the sovereignty of God over all scientific or biological process is something to which Christians should work towards. And so I think we have to be very careful that given that the center of the Christian faith is God's revelation in Christ, that we don't package that with something which may perhaps offend a scientist who is not a Christian.
It's a very challenging subject. Thank you both very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.